This is the start of chapter 2. Although chapter 2 is still on groups, it's just different types of groups, more groups and cosets. Hinati lang natin kasi masyadong mahabang chapter kapag ilagay natin siya sa iisang chapter. But this is actually still on groups. And the first topics under this chapter is what we call a permutation group. Permutation group. So the first thing that we have to do here is to define what we mean by a permutation. And as a math major, I am sure that this is not your first time hearing this word. Specifically, I think you've been, I mean, you had this topic under statistics and probability, or I think sa modern geometry. Permutation is actually synonymous to what we already know, arrangement of objects. Yun lang naman yung ibig sabihin natin sa permutation even in this course na abstract algebra. We just have a more formal mathematical definition here. More or anchored to abstract algebra. A permutation of a set is a function. We can generalize that function as phi, which maps a set. So meron kang set, it's mapped to itself. So it's a function on set A that is both one-to-one and onto. Ibig sabihin, bijection siya. That is a permutation. So halimbawa, no, ito yung set na binigay. Tapos, i-rearrange natin yan. That will give us a permutation. So halimbawa, the set 4, 2, 5, 3, 1 is a permutation of the given set A. Andito yung mapping niya, makikita natin na it's a function. So yung phi na nandyan, it's actually corresponding to the mapping of each elements of the given set to the rearrange. Parang siya mismo din lang naman ito. Kaya lang na-disarrange siya, na-rearrange. It has to be one-to-one, both one-to-one and onto. If it's only one-to-one or if it's only onto, then it's not considered a permutation. So, yun lang yung ibig sabihin natin ng permutation. This is not a permutation because it's not one-to-one. Actually, that is enough to say that this is not a permutation. Although, in this case kasi, parehas na not one-to-one and not onto. And why is that again? If you notice, yung 3 dito, it's not one-to-one. I mean, the function is not one-to-one because there are elements in our codomain or in our range that is mapped, that is an image of 2 elements from the domain. So, hindi unique. Yun yung definition natin ng one-to-one. Dapat lahat ng elements natin sa range, dapat isa lang ang kaniyang 3 image. But, in the case of 3 here, dalawa. 1 and 5. Although, ang normally yung pagka-arrow kasi natin before ay ganyan. Punta dyan. Naulit yung 3 dito sa range. It's also not onto because unang ang ating set dito, ang ating codomain dito ay si A mismo. And nandito as defined in this statement. So therefore, lahat dapat present sa range pero walang 1. 1, 2, 3, 4 yan. Kasi 1 ang wala. So this is not considered a permutation. Again, it doesn't have to not satisfy the 2 para lang masabing hindi siya permutation. Any of the conditions here, if not satisfied, will that set, that rearrangement is not considered a permutation. Kulang ito. That is a permutation. So, there's a lot of possible permutation if this is the given set. This is just one of those possible permutations. Okay, I have here a question. I have 2 sets we are still referring, I mean, the given set here is still set A. And we have two sets here. Let's identify which is a permutation and not a permutation based on the definition. Okay? May I ask everyone to participate? Pwede nating i-chat lang if that's okay. One or two lang. Which of the following gives a permutation or both? Okay? So, the second one is not a permutation kasi, well, 4 ulit. Naulit siya. It's not one-to-one. Kasi ito ang range sana natin. Hindi siya parehas sa codomain natin. Yes. Tama. Okay. Now, may standard notation tayo ng permutations para hindi natin sinusulat na as a set na gaya ng ginawa natin kanina. So, if this is the given set, the first is we normally give names. So, ang gagamitin natin, most references do use the small letters of the Greek alphabet. This is alpha, for example, this is beta, this is tau. Yung iba, delta, mga tas small letters. So, we can name them. Of course, because they are sets. However, because these permutations are exclusively a topic under abstract algebra, meron din siyang sariling notation. So, ano yung notation na yon? Ito. So, we use a parenthesis, tapos dalawang rows. Yung first row, that is actually the given set. So, actually, parang mapping, parehas lang yung mapping sa kanina, naging horizontal lang. So, this is the given set, and this is the permutation. This is the permutation. So, 1 is mapped to 4, 2 is mapped to 2, 3 is mapped to 5, and so on and so forth. Because this is a function, parang alpha of 1 is equal to 4. Anong ibig sabihin ng alpha of 1? Parang kapag i-evaluate natin ang 1 sa function na ito, hindi nga lang siya our typical algebraic function. It's a permutation. So, it's 4. Yeah. Alpha of 2 is 2. But this is our standard notation for a permutation. This is another permutation and another permutation. Of course, there are more possible permutations that can be derived from this given set. This is the Greek letter tau. T-E-U, tau. Alright. Okay. Because we are trying to understand what we mean by a permutation group. This is, again, a topic that still discusses groups. Pero ano yung group na yon? It's actually called permutation group. That's the reason why we are first presenting to you what we mean by a permutation. And, of course, to form a group, kailangan meron tayong binary operation. For permutations, kasi yun yung elements ng set natin, ang binary operation naman dito ay tinatawag na permutation multiplication. This is a term by Fraley. But if you read, sino na yung isa? Si, sino na yung isang author? Si Galliat. He terms it permutation composition. So, ito yung main natin kasi my main reference actually is si Fraley. Pero kumukuha din ako kay Galliat and this is the term he used. Now, ito yung operation na gagamitin natin so that we can form now the permutation group. So yung set natin, just the set of all permutations na possible in a given set. And then the binary operation attached to it is called permutation multiplication. Again, we are using multiplication, but of course, we will discover that this is not our usual permutation. in the first place, these are not numbers, that the objects that we are not multiplying. So, yun yung illustrate natin ngayon. Given two or more, or even one, no, permutation or permutations, how do we perform permutation multiplication? For example, what is alpha times beta? Or beta times tau? Or alpha times beta times tau? How are we going to evaluate this? Now, the rule is given at the bottom. To multiply permutations, it says we start from right to left and top to bottom. There are other books that uh, instead of starting from right to left, they start from left to right and then top to bottom. Well, mas madami yung gumagamit ng ganito. This is more conventional. So, how do we multiply permutations nga ba? For example, we take this 2 and then multiply, starting with alpha and then multiplied to beta. Now, we're going to start from right, the rightmost permutation, going to the left, and then from top to bottom. So, how did we arrive at this answer? So, we start from the first element of the rightmost permutation, and then we simply trace. Iti-trace lang natin kung ano yung pinaka-last na element. That's why it's called also function composition. If 1 is mapped to 3 in the first permutation, saan nakamap ang 3 sa second permutation? So 1 is mapped to 3 and 3 is mapped to 5. So the answer is 1 is bali mapped to 5. Ganun din dito, 2 is mapped to 2, while 2 is still mapped to 2, kaya 2 is still mapped to 2 in the final answer. 3 to 4, 4 to 3, kaya 3 to 3. 4 to 1, 1 to 4, kaya 4 to 4. Nakuha natin doon. 5 to 5, 5 to 1. This is now the product. Permutation, the product or the result of permutation, multiplication that we just did. Beta times alpha, ganun din, 1, 4, 4 to 1. That's why we have 1 to 2, 2, 2 map to 2, still 2, 3 to 5, 5 to 5, so 3 to 5, 4 to 3, 3 to 4, kaya 4 to 4, map. 5 map to 1, and then 1 to 3, kaya 5 and 3. Yan. Sulat natin dito, 5 map to 3. Okay. So, now it's your turn. You can get a piece of paper and then try to solve this one. I'm going to give you 2 minutes. Kasya ba ang 2 minutes? Yes. To answer the 2 questions here. Multiply beta and tau, and then sa third one, tatlo, tau, beta, and alpha. Actually, the idea is just the same. I'm going to give you 2 minutes to do that.
Sa second line, 1
We're going to introduce again another notation. Medyo cumbersome kasi yung ganito, no? Pag magsusulat pa tayo ng cycle, kailangan may 2, 2, 4, 4, 5, 5. So this is just the general notation for a permutation. But for cycles, because they are special permutations, we can actually also use a user-friendly, a more friendly notation para hindi tayo masyadong mahirap magsulat ng ganyan. So instead of writing this one this way, we can actually, because it's a cycle, we can use the what we call the cyclic notation. And so if we're going to write it in cyclic notation, the same permutation, the same cycle can be written as simply 1, 3, 6. 1, 3, 6. Ito naman, 2, 8. At ito naman ay 4, 5, 4, 7, 5. Of course, makikita natin na yung length ng u sub 1 at u sub 3 ay 3. Ang length naman ng gitna, u sub 2 ay, mu sub 2 ay 2. Because cycles are just special types of permutations, they can be multiplied just as any two permutations. Siyempre naman, consider the cycles in the previous example. So ito yung dalawang cycle at tatlong cycle na yun. No? I-multiply natin in this arrangement. By the way, for permutations, later on pala. How do we multiply this one? Well, recall that these cycles here is just the same as this one. Parang ginamit na natin yung standard, no, notation for permutation. And easily, we can trace the product. 1, 1, 1, 1, at saka 1, 3. Kaya 1, 3 yung laman dito. Yung answer natin dito. 2, 2, 2 to 8, at saka 8 to 8. Kaya 8 din yung final answer. And we do the same process, makukuha natin yung entire permutation na ito. Actually, if you look at it, kung mag-start ka dyan, makukuha mo ba ito? That is, 1 is mapped to 3. So, 1 is mapped to 3. And 3 is mapped to 6. 6 is mapped to 3 is mapped to 6 ito. And then, of course, babalik siya. 6 is mapped to 1. 6 is mapped to 1. And then, you use also this one. 2 is mapped to 8. 2 is mapped to 8. And then 8 is mapped to 2. That's another orbit. And then 4 to 5. 7 to 5. 4 to 7. 7 to 5. And 5 to 4. Yan, makukuha pa rin natin yun. So, we can generate the same even without looking at these 3 here in the middle. These cycles are disjoint, another term, because if you look at it, one integer is only present in only one of the cycles. So, walang overlaps. Yun yung ibig sabihin ng disjoint. Any integer is moved by at most one of the cycles, thus no one number appears in the notations of two different cycles. Every permutation sigma of a finite set is a product of disjoint cycle. That is a very powerful theorem. It's already saying that every permutation, kung permutation lang, ibig sabihin, i-check mo lang kung na-satisfy niya yung condition natin for a permutation to be indeed a permutation of a finite set, limited to finite set. You can express them as product of disjoint cycles. Halimbawa, we are now working in S sub 6. If this is the cycle, if this is the permutation, not necessarily a cycle, how do you express it as a product of disjoint cycles? 1, 6, kunin start natin dito. 1, 6, 6, 1, and then the cycle repeats. So one cycle is 1, 6. And then 2, 5, 5, 3, 3, 2, 2, 5 again. So the cycle repeats. We have the second cycle, 2, 5, at saka 3. And then we have a note here that multiplication of disjoint cycles is commutative. Walang not dyan, baka ma-confuse tayo. So that the order 1, 6 and 2, 5, 3 is not really important. So kahit unahin natin yung 2, 5, 3 kaysa sa 1, 6, if we're going to put it back to its original notation, permutation, makukuha pa rin natin ito. Kasi yung nasa taas naman, naka-arrange na yan as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The product of two cycles need not be a cycle. Tandaan din natin, natin yun. Magbigay tayo ng, ano no, cycle, ng example. So we have two cycles here in S6 pa rin tayo. We are working under S sub 6. Their product is not a cycle. So let's look at their product. 1, 4. Ayan. Kaya kailangang ilagay natin pa rin yun, no? Kasi minsan, hindi natin makuha yung product by simply looking at the given cycles. Itong cycle na ito, this is the equivalent. Permutation. Naka-fix ang 2 at saka 3. 2 to 2, 3 at saka 3. Ganon din sa 2, 5, 1. Ito yun. And, if we look at the result, ito, bakit hindi siya cycle? Bakit kaya hindi ito cycle? Anyone? Ang sabi niya kasi, the product of two cycles need not be a cycle. Pero bakit siya hindi cycle? Ito, cycle itong dalawang to eh. Bakit hindi siya cycle? Ano na yung definition ng cycle? Cycle if at most one ang orbit na more than two ang elements. So, that is an orbit of the cycle. If this is to be a cycle, dapat yun lang. The rest is pare-parehas lang yan. 2, 2, 3, 3, 4, 4, 5, 5 dapat. Pero hindi eh. We can still identify cycles na more than 2 yung elements. 2, 4, 4, 5, 5, 2. So that is another orbit containing 3 elements. Yan. Actually, ang nakafix lang dyan ay si 3. How about the other one? This one, nagpalit lang ang minultiply natin na una yung 2, 5, 2, 1, 5. Tingnan natin kung ilang orbits. 1 to 4, 4 to 2, 2 to 1, tapos bumalik siya. 1, 1 ulit to 4. And then, 5 to 6, 6 to 5, that's another orbit. Dalawa silang orbit. Ayan, so it's not a cycle. Ito, yung ginamit natin ay cycle. Why is that? Kasi, makikita natin na isa lang naman yung orbit dito. 1, 4, 4, 5, 5, 6, 6, 1, tas naulit. And then the other elements here, orbit naman siya pero single element. Single element. So hindi ka kasama yun sa hindi pwede for it to be a cycle. This is a cycle. Ganun din dito. Yeah. I think that's the end of my lecture today. Do you have questions? Questions?
None so far, sir.
Okay. So kung wala, then let's end the lecture here. Medyo agahan natin ngayon. I'm going to upload na lang uh, the PDF version of this. Again, tomorrow I'll just be giving you one activity. Siyempre, ito yung laman.